All right, and now we have another panel coming up, and it is being moderated by the incomparable Anne-Marie McLaughlin. Hi, Anne-Marie.
You are too kind.
No, this is great. I cannot wait to see this. I'm going to back away, turn the mic over to you. Then I'm going to be a participant, just enjoying it with everyone else.
Here we have, okay, I see everyone here. This is fabulous. Thank you so much, Vance, and thank you to everyone on the planning team here. Let me just make sure I'm all set. So my name is Anne-Marie McLaughlin. I'm the Director of Emergency Management and Continuity at NYU. I use she, her pronouns. The physical description part is always challenging. I'm a middle-aged female with reddish blonde hair. How's that? So I'm really delighted to facilitate this panel. I have a background in public relations as well as emergency management. So this is near and dear to my heart. This is a special panel. We've got folks from different disciplines. We've got practitioners. We're very excited to have somebody with academic research to bring to bear, and also someone from the technology realm. As we know, technology is so important when we think about alert and warning. We know that not everyone in the community receives or processes information in the same way. But we also know that alerting is critical to save lives. So this is a really important topic. I'm so grateful to have the panel that we have with us. I'm going to provide a little bio, and then we will follow the same format as Vance did before us. Each person will have about 5 minutes to speak to the topic, and then we'll go into questions. Again, no PowerPoint slides, keeping this to a fireside chat, as Vance likes to say. So we have David Meyer. He's the Program Manager, State of California Alert and Warning Program from the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. He's got over 25 years of state service, and he currently serves as Program Manager for the State of California's Alert and Warning Program. It is a daunting task. He is responsible as the lead for providing guidance and support to California.
Sorry, can you read a little bit slower for the interpreters, please?
Sorry. It's a combination of Boston and New York. I'm sorry. So as the lead, he is responsible for providing guidance and support to California's 138 alerting authorities. Prior to his current role, he served as the communications chief for the state for 8 years. We're very excited to have him with us. Noah Ryder is the Chief Customer Officer from Rave Mobile Safety, a Motorola Solutions company. He and his team are responsible for empowering Rave's customers to impact emergency response, critical communications, and community safety through technology. He has previously served in various public sector and public safety roles, including Assistant City Manager for the City of Sandy Springs, Georgia, EMS Director for Grady Health System in Atlanta, and as the Director of EMS Security and Emergency Preparedness for Lenox Hill Hospital here in New York City. He holds degrees from Rice University and the University of Houston and resides in Fort Collins, Colorado. We also are delighted to have with us Dr. Jeanette Sutton. She specializes in disaster and risk with a primary focus on online informal communication and public alerts and warnings disseminated via short messaging channels. Much of her research investigates the evolving role of communication and communications technology, including social media and mobile devices, for disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. She is employed at the University of Albany, SUNY, as an associate professor in the Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. She is also the director of the Emergency and Risk Communication Message Testing Lab. And in her spare time, I love this part, she critiques wireless emergency alerts on Twitter. You can find her, her handle is at Warning Rater. WARNINGRATER. It's fabulous. And she also hosts a webpage called The Warn Room, as in warning, thewarnroom.com altogether. She's held numerous grants. She's a very productive, prolific academic. She's got a lot of publications in risk analysis, Journal of Homeland Security, et cetera. You can find the details on the website. Her PhD in sociology is from the University of Colorado in Boulder, and she completed her postdoc training at the Natural Hazards Center. And we also have with us Jorge Rodriguez. He has been in emergency management for over 8 years. He is the Community Alert and Warning Coordinator for the County of Sonoma Department of Emergency Management. He has been with Sonoma County since June of 2020. He was in the county as an EMMA resource during the 2019 Kincaid fire. His experience includes bilingual public information work. He's produced live stream press briefings during COVID-19 and radiological emergency preparedness and planning messaging. He's a CEM, and in his formal role as a Community Alert and Warning Coordinator, Jorge was responsible for managing the SOCO alert mass notification system and the auto-generated message system. He also had a hand in general planning and operations. He is now the Supervising Emergency Services Coordinator overseeing the Emergency Coordination Division. We are so happy to have this distinguished panel with us today. And as mentioned, we're going to go ahead and each person's going to have about 5 minutes to share their experience and their ideas about this topic, inclusive alert and warning, and then we will ask some questions. As before, I can anticipate this topic will also generate a lot of questions, as we saw with the last topic. We will follow the same protocol. They'll be collecting the questions in the Q&A section. So if you have a question, please include it in the Q&A and we will collect it and we will get back to you. So with that, we will go to David Meyer. David, do you want to share your ideas on this topic?
Yeah, thank you, Anne-Marie. As mentioned, my name is David Meyer. I am the program manager of the Alert and Warning Program for the state of California. I've been the Alert and Warning in the Alert and Warning Program now for about 5 years and about 2 years now as a manager. And I've seen just about everything that can happen with alerting with all the disasters that California has faced. Some of my thunder, I think, was stolen by the keynote and some of the other addresses because they are also from Cal OES. And so as they spoke about disasters and the need to be prepared for those disasters, they definitely covered what I would have covered as far as the incidents that we've been involved with. I can tell you that I have a great staff that supports my team. It's what we do is not possible as an individual, but with the staff. And my staff is made up of individuals with very interesting backgrounds. I have one that was a survivor of the Sonoma fires in 2017. She did lose her home in that fire, but she understands the importance of alert and warning. And she also was a CAD dispatcher for Marin County before that. I also have a new individual that actually was involved in setting up shelters and transporting individuals from evacuation sites during the same fires. So he has that first responder mentality to alert and warning as well. So also, just to share a little story about kind of where I come from and what I've seen with the whole inclusive nature of alert and warning. And that is that I have a nephew that he is a nonverbal developmentally delayed young adult. But I've seen him firsthand, the confusion and the chaos that emergencies can play in his life. Recently, we had an issue where he had to deal with some engagements with law enforcement, and then later on with fire due to an incident that happened at home with dad becoming ill. And the paramedic showed up at the door and knocked on the door. He answered the door, but then quickly slammed the door and ran away from the door because he was not sure what was happening. It wasn't until one of the paramedics tried to talk to him through the door, but then also started using American Sign Language to communicate with him, that he really came to a better place. He was a little bit more comfortable trying to have some conversation with the individual. And at the end of the event, just to say, he was actually holding the door open to help them get Dad into the ambulance so that he could then be taken to the hospital. You know, and I say all of that because even the simplest interaction during an emergency can present very real challenges. It's not enough to say that when the emergency is occurring that we need to think about how this may affect vulnerable populations, but we've got to take a ground up approach to inclusive alerting. And that begins with community planning, exercises, and outreach with the access and functional needs communities. So that we can better understand how they're affected by the emergencies and by those alerts. If they're forced to take a protective action, we need to give them enough time and resources to be able to make that evacuation or shelter in place more successful and less dangerous. And that we've identified obstacles that could create additional stress and possibly add confusion to an already very complex situation. As mentioned above a little bit before from the keynote and from other, I think Vance has talked about it as well, the state's been involved in creating the state alert warning guidelines. The original guidelines were published in 2019, and it was a very well-written document that provides guidance on alert warning. It provides roles, it provides experience on message creation, and kind of how and when alerting would be appropriate, as well as all the other toolkits that might be needed in order to be successful in the approach. Now, that being said, the first set of guidelines was done in 2019, and as a result of Assembly Bill 580, we actually took another look at the guidelines and we added additional folks to our planning team. We have an alert and warning specialist committee that's set up under our SIMS committees. And in that committee, we have several members of the access and functional needs community that provided input on what the new guidelines look like. And we took a look at the guidelines, not as a single chapter within the guidelines, but actually as an entire rewrite of the effort within the guidelines, so that everywhere in the guidelines, it would preach inclusivity. And I think we've done a great job with that. It's actually going through its final review process right now. And as that's made available, we would certainly encourage everybody to take a look at it. It was very well received, and it has some planning and other guidelines in the back for your alert warning programs, as well as templates. It utilizes some templates from some of the Dr. Maletti practices for message creation. And I'm thrilled to death to have Jeanette Sutton on to speak about what she's doing now with message creation and the whole science behind that. So, you know, the final piece of that is that my team is very involved in technology. We are looking at all types of technology that we hope will lessen the burden on vulnerable populations during disasters, making alerts and warnings available in multiple languages, potentially ASL, audio playback, and it will greatly increase the reach of alerts and warnings into areas that have been excluded in years past. It's our hope that we can engage with multiple different partners to bring alerting to all persons so that they can be included in all of our alerting efforts now and into the future. And again, I'll yield back and look forward to the panel discussion. Thank you.
Anne-Marie, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Noah. Dr. Sutton, would you like to go next? Since you were mentioned, and I'm reading the Q&A here, folks are interested in resources. We will be providing resources along with the answers to questions. So as folks are noting reports and links, Dr. Sutton previously provided some links, so those will be sent out afterwards. Dr. Sutton, please.
Sure. Thank you. And it's really a pleasure to be here and to participate in this conversation. And Thank you, David, for kicking that off and talking about the amazing resources that are available in California, and the leadership that you're providing across the United States by developing those different guidance documents and such. My background is as an academic. I've been studying alerts and warnings for about 20 years now. Dr. Dennis Moletti was my advisor, and I feel incredibly fortunate to be able to continue the work that we started together back in the early 2000s. So my pathway as a student and then as an academic was to study how risk was communicated over different kinds of channels, and I focused on short messaging channels, primarily initially through Twitter, starting in like 2006 as it was first starting, and really seeing how it could be this amazing channel for collective intelligence and communication between people, as well as from public officials to individuals. And by the what we call technological affordances that come with these new channels, like a social media channel, which allows not only information to come to you, but to also to communicate back. So there's a dialogue between individuals and officials. And then the incorporation of things beyond just text, the audio, the video, the visuals, all of those things can increase the ability for people to have access to really key information that's needed in what we call an imminent threat situation, which is something is coming, it's going to happen very, very soon, and we need information quickly. And those social media channels also made it possible for members of the public to exchange information about things like, how do I find this evacuation information that's so important that was just discussed in the last panel, which providing that information, obviously from a trusted resource would be the best option, but in the absence of that, people would exchange that information through their trusted networks online. So we started to study those things as Twitter was rolling out, and we were seeing it also on Facebook. And Twitter is not as great a resource as it used to be, and when it was initially launched. I don't know where emergency managers and risk communicators are going to turn to next as a channel that they can rely on to communicate in real time, that provides that accessible information and exchange of information. But the initial days, we really saw it as a wonderful place that could provide this collective activity of communicating. And then as the wireless emergency alert system started to roll out in the early 2012, that was when I got to start working again with Dr. Moletti, who has unfortunately passed. He died from COVID 2 years ago. So his memory, we continue to the research agenda that he began, we continue that, and a lot of it is on his shoulders, which we're very thankful for. But the work in wireless emergency alerts has really expanded because of a lot of attention that it's gotten, especially if we think back to some really key alerts that have captured the imagination of the entire United States. I think to the intercontinental ballistic missile alert that was issued to the state of Hawaii around Christmas time a few years ago, and how that really, I think, made people recognize the power of alerting systems and the system itself, as well as the messages that go out over them, and how important it is to think about how we communicate using these channels that have such a broad reach in such an instantaneous fashion. And that attention that was brought from that false alarm brought greater attention from Congress to improve wireless emergency alerts nationwide. And so from that, as David alluded to, the science of alerting, the science of messaging, the integrated public alert and warning system from FEMA has funded a project that we've been working on at the University at Albany to design what we call the message design dashboard, which will help message originators to construct messages in real time by giving them the contents that they need to develop a message following the workflow that has been identified through research that shows this is the structure of a message from beginning to end that is the best case, and helping to provide those contents about the hazard and the hazard impacts and the guidance that's necessary for people to make a decision about what they're going to do in response to those hazards. It's based in research. We are thrilled to be able to provide this kind of technology to all alerting originators. And when I think about access and functional needs related to this, as Vance and I were talking about it in preparation for this webinar, I was thinking about how so much of the traditional research within the disaster space around alerts and warnings has focused not on people with access and functional needs in terms of visual and auditory needs, but vulnerable populations very broadly. And in thinking about that, we recognize that some of the most important things that we need to do when we're communicating imminent threat messages is to have a very complete message that is internally consistent among its parts, that's very clear and does not include jargon or technological terms. It's accurate, obviously. And then, but as Vance and I were talking, I was thinking imminent threat often means that those messages are going out very close to the time of an event occurring, which means that not only do we need to rethink, we as wireless emergency alerts and our other communication, about how to meet the needs of this broadly vulnerable population, but also think about how do we make it possible for them to take actions so that they have the time to take the actions in addition to understanding that message and having the self-efficacy to act. So feeling that they can act because they have the time as well as the resources, in addition to the knowledge and the ability to understand what we're asking people to do. So one of the things that I did in my free time, as Anne-Marie alluded to, was to create this website called The Warn Room, and it's TheWarnroom.com, I think. I'll put it in the chat, or you'll get it as a resource. And my intention was to take scientific research on alerts and warnings and translate it for the average practitioner so that you can take all of the stuff we've been learning for the last 50 years and apply it directly to the messages that you are writing. So we take existing messages that are available through pbs.org, through the pbs.warn site online, and I see bad messages on a daily basis. My intention is to take those and edit them to show you how some tweaks to the language and to the formatting of the information can drastically improve how they are received and understood by just making some changes to the language. And so that is my contribution back to the broader community, not the academic community, but the broader community, by communicating science in easier to digest ways. So I will stop there, and I'm excited to have a conversation with the rest of my colleagues who are on this call.
Definitely, definitely. Very excited. So we're hearing about, the ideal message. There's the message itself, and then there's the way it gets to the people. And so this brings us to Noah from Rave. Noah, what can you share?
Hopefully I can contribute something on top of what I know the other panelists will. You've assembled quite the panel here, but I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in what's a really important discussion. So as Anne-Marie mentioned earlier, my name's Noah Reiter. I'm currently the Chief Customer Officer for Rave Mobile Safety, which is now a division of Motorola Solutions. For the better part of the past 17 years, Rave has partnered with organizations that are responsible for the safety of their communities. Among other solutions, we offer an industry-leading communication platform called Rave Alert to thousands of state and local governments, institutes of higher education, and corporations throughout North America. While I'm obviously partial towards our own technology and the way we do things at Rave, I'll do my best today to sort of serve the role as a representative of your emergency notification technology provider and hopefully represent how at least I believe they should be partnering with you, whether it's us or another one in the space. So your ENS provider shouldn't simply be a development and services shop. They should be an active partner to you with deep subject matter expertise. They should also have a keen interest in your operational needs. Your primary point of contact, likely a member of what's called a customer success team, should serve as your liaison and act as your advocate across the broader organization, doing things like sharing your feedback, connecting you to other parts of the organization, as one example, maybe to our product management team. This customer advocacy approach has allowed us to become a trusted extension of our customers' organizations. And by doing so through this customer-centric philosophy, it creates several opportunities for us as your ENS provider to serve your needs better, more holistically, and ultimately deliver an outstanding customer experience. When I think of what customer experience means, it means not only the technology and how user-friendly it is and the feature set and its capabilities, but it's also how the organization engages with you. So how we as a company engage with you and vice versa. In fact, personally, one of the most rewarding aspects of being an advocate, a trusted advocate for our customers, is being able to connect our customers with one another and providing forums to share and develop best practices. As I alluded to earlier, by participating in these discussions, that deepens our understanding of the current challenges that you all are facing, which also allows us to further strengthen our solutions capabilities, which then can streamline your workflows, broaden your reach, and better protect your community, which is ultimately all of our goal here, right? In addition to the motivation that our customers provide me with on a daily basis, as Anne-Marie mentioned when she shared my bio with you, my pre-rave professional life was spent in EMS administration, emergency management, and city management. There were a couple of notable past experiences that I had that continue to drive my curiosity around how to better engage the community, communicate with the public in a highly inclusive manner. So during the blackout back in 2003, I was the EMS director and on the emergency preparedness team for Lenox Hill Hospital in New York City. Our EMS crews and all others across the 5 boroughs and beyond responded for 26 hours to not only typical calls for service, but also those from individuals impacted by the loss of power. People reliant upon the use of assistive devices, maybe home ventilators, and others. Many of these people required rescue. We, and I assume no one else in the city, had any way of anticipating which residents had pre-existing health conditions or other needs so that we could have been even a bit more proactive. So we basically resorted to answering 911 calls, and we surely did. As an anecdote, one of our crews climbed and descended 144 stories in the course of their shift. Similarly, in 2011, there was a severe winter weather emergency that struck the greater Atlanta area. At the time, I was an assistant city manager for Sandy Springs. I had a number of public safety programs in my portfolio. And again, I witnessed many of the same issues over this 4-day period. While residents in this instance weren't without power, transportation was significantly disrupted. So individuals who required things like regular dialysis, home deliveries of oxygen, missed their appointments, and critical deliveries of medical equipment and other therapies. And this led to unnecessary medical complications. Once again, EMS and fire were left chasing 911 calls, and the healthcare system left picking up the pieces. While some amount of this obviously will always be inevitable, and depending on the size and scope of the incident, systems will obviously be overwhelmed. But I'm still convinced today that we can collaborate to develop better strategies for preparing for these types of scenarios and the needs of the whole community. So I'll stop there, but once again, I really also look forward to today's discussion and also to learning from the other panelists and all of you, and I'll do my best to share some of my perspectives.
No, thank you, Noah. And, I've worked with Rave over the years, and, it's true, bringing practitioners together is super helpful, right? And becoming more aware of each other's needs and best practices. And so we're really happy to have another practitioner on the panel, Jorge Rodriguez. Jorge, would you like to share your thoughts?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you. Greetings to wherever you may be. I am Jorge Rodriguez, the Supervising Emergency Services Coordinator here for the County of Sonoma, California, Department of Emergency Management. To describe myself, I'm a Mexican-American male with black hair and glasses, and I'm wearing my black polo shirt. To get started, Sonoma County is no stranger to disasters and large-scale emergencies. But to give everyone some perspective, the Department of Emergency Management has only been a part of the County of Sonoma organization for 4 years. It's been around since 2019. But in that time frame, the county has proclaimed 13 local emergencies. So to the Cal OES Chief Deputy's point earlier, we too are still in the recovery for some of these emergencies. But we'll go back a bit farther to the point where this really begins 2017. And in 2017, the county experienced a series of large and devastating wildfires where, within a matter of hours, we had 36,000 acres consumed by the fire, thousands of structures, primarily homes, burned to the ground. And we also had the unfortunate loss of life that was in the number of dozens. But to the subject here for alert and warning, at that time, for that incident, alert and warning was deemed a failure in the days, weeks, and months that came after the fire. Alerts were sent out to a small number of residents, with some of those warning messages sent to areas already burned to the ground and no longer there, folks already evacuated. But now, as a practitioner, we've seen a lot of changes here within alert and warning in Sonoma County, but it's been for the better. And now we are at the forefront because of that 2017 experience, and again, the experiences in 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021. We've again a lot of local emergencies since we've been here. Fortunately, no major incidences in 2022. We did have some impacts earlier this year during the January storms. And so far, the 2023, this year's fire season is still a little early for us. So we hope we don't have the need for major alert and warning, but we certainly are ready. To give you some background for the department, we have our own alert and warning division, as Anne-Marie mentioned. I was previously the alert and warning coordinator. The division is managed by a full-time program manager, supported by that coordinator. And this is something that at the time when this was created, this division specific to alert and warning and having staff specific to alert and warning wasn't necessarily something that was heard of for county emergency management. So now, as part of our program, we integrate customer data from local utilities. We get our contact data lists from power water companies. We purchase lists from telecommunication vendors to augment and further the outreach we have in our alerts. So it's much farther and much more larger than what we would get by just folks registering and doing the opt-in type of mass notification. But we make it our priority now here in Sonoma County, and this is one of the things that we continue to do, is to send out alerts in various ways. With our largest commitment, because of 2017 and those disasters that followed, to send out warnings in both English and in Spanish at the same time, not just one after the other, but sending them both at the same time. And that's really what's now an expectation of our community, and we work to make that happen whenever we have that need. So, like was mentioned in the last panel, what we did here to support our residents in the deaf and the hard of hearing community, we obtained a grant to purchase NOAA weather radios with adapters that vibrate and have a light strobe flasher to get the residents' attention, letting them know that the radio is activated. It doesn't change necessarily the way of how we send out the alerts, but it helps us reach more residents by using that technology and the infrastructure that's out there to leverage that and be able to offer a more robust alert and warning program. One of our cities obtained a separate grant to purchase several thousand of these radios for the residents as well. So these radios are now also out in the community and of course, ready to get the alert if we were to send one. And for some perspective on Sonoma County, we are a large agricultural area. Sonoma County wine is being a huge industry here. And we have workers and harvesters who pick and harvest, often coming from out of the area or even out of the country to work. They work in remote areas and sometimes live in employer-sponsored housing that's also in the remote area where cell phone signal is spotty at best, or they may not be non-existent at all. So using that same NOAA weather radio system and using that technology, we started a program with our Agricultural Commissioner's Office to not only supply our radio, but we also came up with a poster that has information on what to do if this radio activates, if it plays the emergency alert tones, what those workers should do, who to contact, the evacuation zone that's specific to that area, the radio stations that they should tune to is on that poster, and it's listed right there, clearly visible, so that there's an understanding of what to do next. And as we get further to the panel discussion here, just want to quickly say that there is no one system, and we're fortunate to have a Rave here as part of the panel, but there's no one system that works for everything and for everyone. It doesn't work for us as local government, the alert originators, those who push the button, and certainly for residents to reach everyone at that 100%. So what we do is we use what we have available, the resources and systems that we have available to push that alert out and provide as much warning as possible early on in an incident. And we do that to get our best and most reach out in the community. And there was a question in the last panel on what the responsibility of residents is, and I'll touch on that here. It's our responsibility as residents of our own community is to know those alerting systems that are available to you and what your local jurisdiction offers and carries and has available, and have access to 2 or 3 of them. Register if you need to. We have the technology for NOAA weather radios. If your local jurisdiction is using that program, getting a radio that's programmed to your locality. Have a support plan for yourself. Asking yourself and answering the questions. What do I have to help me? Who do I have to help me? Is it my neighbor or things? What am I going to do? Where or when will I go if I receive an alert? And so answering those questions now, so when the time comes, you're smelling smoke, you're seeing the floodwaters rising, you're not asking yourself at that point, I got this alert, something is happening, obviously, now what? Now what do I do? Have that plan in place already. And real quickly, para mis participantes de habla hispana, and I'll say this in Spanish, es importante saber los sistemas de alertas y advertencias de tu comunidad. Averigüe cómo va a recibir las alertas y lo que va a hacer cuando las reciba. Tome tiempo ahora, antes de la emergencia, porque es importante estar listo y tener un plan. Gracias and thank you. I'll stop there, Anne-Marie, and thank you for the privilege of your time.
Thank you, Jorge. And I'm anticipating the question of what particular weather radio you all provided. So if we can include that in the package that we send out to folks afterwards, I think that would probably be good information for folks to have. So now we're going to move in. Thank you, everybody, for your initial comments. We're going to move into some questions. And just going back to David, you're involved in revising and improving California's alert and warning guidelines. Could you help us understand how you were able to, really help the guidelines prioritize and incorporate the unique requirements of people with access and functional needs? We think about limited mobility, sensory impairments, cognitive disabilities. How did you go about that, and what do the guidelines provide now?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Emery. First of all, I think one of the things that we've done that's really strengthened our efforts in the state is, and we've kind of added, we've already talked about it a little bit, but it was the adding of the access and functional needs office to our agency. Vance Taylor and his team have been absolutely integral in our efforts of better understanding what's needed during disasters and how those alerts are going to be formulated, timing that would be involved in sending those alerts, and all of the different variables that come about. And really what we've done to prioritize our efforts is that, again, the guidelines, we set up the Alert and Warning Specialist Committee. And in that committee, we added individuals that, in fact, Jeff is one of your previous panel members, is a member of that committee. And so he was able to give us a perspective from folks that are site deprived and what they would need to see in an alert. And what that guidance would need to be to the originators of those alerts as they're creating them. And we've seen that also through whole community planning efforts. Our agency is, as a result of AB 580, have definitely dove into the importance of those, not only the plans for the emergency itself, but what the alert plan looks like. And my staff actually reviews, as well as Vance's staff, reviews those alert plans to make sure that we are including all of the populations that we need to be. Everything from, the older generation who the flip phone is their friend, and they don't want to do the smartphone. So how do you reach those individuals? Jorge's mentioned radios, and we in our guidelines, we mention a lot of different methods of reaching those individuals, everything from EAS, which is the emergency alert system, through the television, partnering with other providers that can do things like ASL and other types of interpretations of the message so that we are reaching all of those folks as well. And as a priority within our group, we're really focused on trying to reach out to all of the different vendors and partners and stakeholders to try to figure out the best way that we can move this forward. How can we as the state help them? How can we help them with grants? How can we help them with resources? What can we provide to those individuals so that they can move forward in making alerting a lot more inclusive for the state?
Thank you. Thank you. Super helpful. And I see there's a question here, and I know we're not answering all of it. This is actually a question that I was going to ask Dr. Sutton anyway. When you were talking earlier about the correct message, message quality can really vary. And we've all seen messages, and, maybe even in our own communities, that are hard to understand, the quality is not consistent. What does a well-written message look like in comparison to, not a great alert?
So I actually pulled up some of the examples that I've put up on thewarnroom.com because I have in there something I call the warning gallery, which is kind of a list of messages that don't hit the mark. And then I also have another page called the editor's desk, which takes messages and edits them and shows you how they can be improved. A message that is well written will include 5 contents. It will include the source of the message so people know who it's coming from. That increases people's trust. And it increases their belief in the message, that it's not some spam thing showing up on their phone, especially if it's coming through a wireless emergency alert. If you've opted into a system and a message is supposed to come from that organization, the source is maybe intuited by the message receiver, but we get so many notifications on our phones, we may not know who it's from if it doesn't actually say who that source is. The second thing a message should include is the name of the hazard itself. And what that hazard could potentially do to people. I frequently will see a message that doesn't include the name of the hazard. It will just tell people to evacuate, or it will tell people to shelter in place without telling them why. And that is something that, David, we could probably have conversations about the language around those things, about how can we improve people's understanding of why they're being asked to take those actions and how understanding that will lead them to have greater personalization of the threat, so that the personalization itself increases people's perception that the risk applies to them, and then they can make the decision to take an action. When you tell somebody to evacuate or shelter in place, and it's basically an order or a command, you're taking away some of their self-efficacy or their self-motivation, and people simply do not just do what they're told to do anyways. The third thing a message needs to include is the location, which is very hard to describe when you're doing it in a short amount of characters on a short message. We do not yet know how effective adding a map would be to messaging, but it is something that we've considered and thought, how could we improve that? Perhaps if it was utilizing some sort of an app that places the individual at the location of the threat so they can see it's very personalized information, that may help. Also, we need to know the timing of the event itself, or when they need to take action by, so that we understand if we have the time to actually do what's being told or recommended, or if we need to consider a different action that may not even be recommended, as we're making sense of what is happening around us with the environmental cues and the social cues that are present. And then perhaps the most important thing, which I've left for last, is the guidance. People need to know how to take what actions they should take and how to take those actions effectively. And when you couple that with what the hazard impacts are, people can make sense of, I'm being asked to take this action because this could be the impact from this threat. And when putting all that information together, it helps people to make sense of the conditions holistically and how they can protect themselves. So I thought I would share with you just a few examples of messages that lack some of those things. When a message is complete, it includes all 5 of those things. And you can see by a couple of these messages that I'll just read to you that they're not complete. And when they're not complete, it reduces our ability to understand the hazard, where it's located, what we need to do to protect ourselves. It decreases our belief in what may be happening, especially if the source information is not included. It decreases our ability to personalize what's happening, especially if we don't know that we are in the location of that threat, or don't understand that the risk can affect us directly. And so those are things that we really want to increase, because that will motivate people to take action. So here's an example of a message that was sent recently. It says, sheriff request all residents to shelter in place due to incident on town line. So that was a wireless emergency alert that was issued. And if we were to rewrite that, we notice, so it said, sheriff request all residents to shelter in place. So we can assume that that message is from the sheriff's office. So that would be the first thing I would change, is to say the county sheriff is issuing this message. And then I would tell them why they're being asked to shelter in place. I would say that it's some sort of a law enforcement activity. And this law enforcement activity could lead to these kinds of things. That is the reason that we want people to take this action of sheltering in place. If I was located in town line, I would understand where that is, but I might provide additional information about where that is, the timing at which the sheltering in place should occur, and for how long. And if they don't know for how long, adding additional information about where they can go to get more information would be incredibly valuable. A phone number, a link to a website, a link to a social media webpage where there can be some conversation about what's happening, so that people can confirm information. Because when we receive a warning, our first natural instinct is to confirm it with other people, to confirm that the information is correct and that the hazard is going to actually occur. And so by providing a place for people to go to talk to each other, we may be increasing people's feeling of efficacy and the sense that if I take the action that's recommended, I know other people are doing it too because they trust that information. And that just increases people's motivation to act. So by taking that very short message as an example, we can really improve it by following the guidelines of the source of the message, the hazard and what it can do, where it's located and the timing that hazard is occurring, and then telling people how to respond so that they can take action to protect themselves.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much. I feel, really grateful to be on this panel and to be listening to this. And I actually, the next question for Noah is, what is the role of technology provider in alert and warning? As I'm seeing the Q&A, like a lot of people are going to, when you mentioned, Dr. Sutton, maps, or, folks are asking about ArcGIS and about AI, chat GPT, all of this stuff, it's technology is tied to messaging, right, in emergency management. So Noah, the question is, what's the role of the technology provider? But if anything that Dr. Sutton mentioned, if you want to respond, please do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the guidance based on, many years, if not decades of research is extremely sound, and we're lucky to have you as a panelist. Some of the questions that are coming in around, as Anne-Marie mentioned, chat GPT and artificial intelligence and lots of new technologies that are emerging. We obviously are constantly exploring opportunities to strengthen our own platforms through these new and emerging technologies, but doing so in a responsible manner. It's, chat GPT, based on my limited interaction with it, is incredibly powerful. Would you trust it to author a message for you? Yeah, I see Dr. Sutton shaking her head no. But there's potentially an application for it. Remains to be seen. I think in line with, one of the other, questions around language translation and auto translators, they're good. We all know they're not perfect. Nothing replaces the human in, crafting an effective message. Moving on to, a related question, concern, or acknowledgement that's been posted in the Q&A is around character limitations, right? So we'd love for messages to provide all of the detail, all of the potential impacts, all of the instructions possible, but most providers require that you do it within 160 characters, or, a wireless emergency alert, 90 characters. So you have character constraints, which makes it even more challenging to construct the perfect message. Or what's the highest star rating on your website? I was glancing, is it 4 or 5 stars, Dr. Sutton? Because I've recognized you don't necessarily want to be featured on this website, but there are a few good examples, which is great. But yeah, there's a real character limitation, and the reason that our company enforces the character limitation is for speed. I think many of the panelists discussed earlier the need in many of these instances to get the message out quickly. Speed is critical. Time is of the essence. Usually, unless we're talking about a hurricane or something like that, we don't have a lot of notice for these incidents, right? So if you're doubling the number of SMS text messages you're sending out because you allow through your interface a user to send a 300 character message, which the SMS aggregator is going to break up into 2 messages, you're now doubling the time that it takes to communicate with your community. So there's definitely a balance here between getting the information right, doing it in a concise manner, and doing it in a manner that the receiver can effectively interpret, whether it's because it's translated, whether because maybe there's a graphic or a map or a certain call to action. And then I see some comments or questions about both Rave and some of our competitors about how we allow additional characters, let's call them, or instructions through a link that we embed in an alert. So we still maintain the 160 character limit so that we can get all of the messages out as quickly as possible. But if you need to drive your recipients to more detailed instructions or maybe visuals or graphics, you can do so by embedding a link. So we offer that, and I know many of the other providers do as well. So hopefully that's helpful.
It's super helpful. As a practitioner myself, and I'm looking at David and Jorge, like, you know, practitioners, we're in this position of we want to reach our communities. And, you know, so Jorge, this will be for you. You know, we're thinking about all these different technologies and again, crafting the message. What gaps have you found in alert and warning? Cell phones, carrier system limitations. It seems like there are lots of different tools and the community is diverse. What are your thoughts?
Sure, no, thank you. And to Noah's point, you know, the infrastructure, the systems that we have access through RAVE or through some other platforms, you know, goes through these federal alerting systems, and those systems have limitations of their own. Not to mention that once we send out an alert and it goes through those federal systems, then it branches out into the cell phone service, and each cell phone service, your AT&T, T-Mobile, et cetera, have different ways that they send out the wireless emergency alerts, those that get pushed to the cell phones. And take it a little bit further from there, we have found that each phone version, your iPhone 6 versus iPhone 7 versus iPhone 12 to your Androids and Google phones, they each have different ways that they display the message. Those different operating systems between your Apple and your Androids. Not to mention that they also rely on cell phone towers. So if the power is out and it's out for extended periods of time, and they don't have the redundant power capabilities, it wouldn't go through that tower, and you who may be sitting right there next to a tower or in close proximity to it, you know, you wouldn't receive that alert. So this is why we use and are looking at using and coming up with different ways to alert the community. I mentioned the NOAA weather radio, and in the comments there's questions on which one is the one to use, and to kind of quickly answer the question. The important piece of a NOAA weather radio is that it have the public alert logo on the box, and this with the public alert logo, it'll sit. Once it's done to your local settings, you can plug it in, set it, forget it, and if your National Weather Service office and if your local jurisdiction has the access to it, you know, that will only go off if you receive or if there's an alert for that area. So it must have the public alert logo, so be sure to look for those. But we, again, use NOAA weather radios. We use SoCo Alert, which is our mass notification system, to get that information out in different ways. We can use it to send out text messages, we use it voice messages, and again, voice messages in both English and Spanish. We can do text messages, or they have an app. We can push it out to our emergency website. So using the technologies that are out there to really leverage and get that alert message out. We're seeing social media, you know, changing in different ways, but we use that as an amplifier to the alert. You know, we use a 2 a.m. or 2 in the morning standard here, that if it's not going to wake somebody up at 2 in the morning because there's an incident, you know, what is something that will work? Back to the weather radios, and there's, you know, those attachments that can help you know, folks that who may also have a hard time waking up. You know, there's some of us who might have a train passing by and we wouldn't know it, you know, when we're in deep sleep. So those things like that we have made available, and we use the systems that are out there, but also partnering with private industry and NOAA and WAVE or RAVE through technologies to kind of get together and forming these connections, being able to let them know what our needs are, and, you know, create the relationship that way as well. And I'll put a plug in there for local alerting originators or emergency managers who are on the call. You know, currently right now the FCC is looking at doing some proposed rulemaking that affects the wireless emergency alerts and the ways that we get those out there. Again, the work that Dr. Sutton does with the message design dashboard and the different translation and ways and things. So that's out there. I believe that it'll be closing here fairly shortly. But again, for local emergency managers to reach out and look for that, to provide their comments as well and be a part of that rulemaking process with our federal partners.
No, thank you. Super helpful. The next question is for David. What are the potential impacts on vulnerable access and functional needs communities when alert systems fail to send out timely and accurate notifications during emergencies? I think we're aware, but what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, we know that the way alerts work and really the way that similar to communications, which was my background before I came into alerting, is it's never talked about unless it goes bad. So when it goes bad, you have to look at why it went bad. Did it go bad because the message that was created was not the right message for what you intended to do? Or did it go bad because infrastructure failed and we didn't have a way of reaching those individuals? So I think that the impacts, and I know in a lot of conversation with Vance and with other stakeholders that I've talked to regarding AFN, it has to do really a lot with timing. I mean, when does that alert get out? If you know you're going to have to remove a population that could be transient, they don't have vehicles, they don't have what they need to get out, or they're an older, like a convalescent hospital or a memory care facility, you've got to give them the time to be able to do what you're asking them to do. It's not as simple as saying, evacuate now, the fire is at your back door. It's got to be, the timing is critical to how you play into that. And really the only way you learn that timing is by that outreach, reaching out to those groups, finding out what it is they need in order to be able to do these things. I know that with Jeff on the line, I've talked with some other individuals that are site deprived, and they've got family members and others that are involved in helping them to do things like evacuate or maybe prepare for something that is coming their direction. And again, without the appropriate timing involved in those things, it's really tough for you to be able to get it out there and know that it's doing what you need it to do. I really think that the state has done a good job with its guidance and identifying some of those things, but there's still gaps. There's still areas that we know that we can do better. And I think the new evacuation guidance that's coming out is going to do a lot of that. And I think also some of the groups that are put together, like we have a group that we work with FEMA on, we partnered with them called When Minutes Matter. And again, When Minutes Matter is a group of emergency managers and other professionals within the public safety realm that have an interest in alert and warning, but this is an opportunity to share in that forum what works, what doesn't, and how we can be better. And I think those are the things that we definitely need to rely on going forward in order to make our programs more successful.
Thank you. Super helpful. I'm keeping an eye on the time. I want to keep going until somebody tells us we're done, because this is fascinating. Dr. Sutton, we're talking about how do we know we're successful, right? And of course, we can look and see if people actually are able to evacuate. One of the questions that I had for Dr. Sutton, alert and warning channels tend to focus on the whole community at the expense of those who are most vulnerable. What do we know about how messages reach those who are at greatest risk, and how can we increase the reach?
Yes, this is a really tough question. It's a step beyond the work that I do in message design, because we're talking about stepping away from the keyboard and going into the community to talk to people about how did they get that message, and was it believable and understandable, and how were they able to take action? And it means going and doing surveys and talking to people about their experiences of a a threatening event, and the decisions that they made in maybe on their own or in collaboration with others to take an action, and whatever that action is on the other end. And so we know that there's a tremendous number of technologies that have emerged that make it possible to reach people, all the different channels that David and Noah and Jorge have talked about, that have different kinds of affordances that allow people to see things, hear things, feel things. And those technologies are wonderful. And yet the most vulnerable people that, as I was talking earlier today with Carol Park, who is the emergency manager for Los Angeles City and County, and she asked me, what about the very most vulnerable people? And the work that I've done has really focused on this very broad, the broad public, because that is a wireless emergency alert goes out to the broad general public. But the very most vulnerable populations, your small pockets of people who are non-English speaking, your smaller pockets of people who are homebound or within an institution or dependent on other providers, those people, the way that those people are reached are most frequently through social networks. And it's through those relationships, through the direct one-to-one communication, through other kinds of, maybe through technologies, but frequently it's when somebody picks up the phone and calls or knocks on the door and says directly to that person, we need to go, or we need to do this. And that is as challenging as technology is, the challenge of communicating directly to an individual one-on-one to help them to make a decision on how to protect themselves or helping them to protect themselves is even greater, because it requires all of us as the whole community to be reaching out and directly communicating and connecting with those individuals. And so the resource intensity of that kind of activity is much more demanding than sitting at the keyboard and writing a message. And yet that is, I believe, truly the place that you have to go to in order to directly connect with those people who are most in need of services. And this is where I step outside of my space of knowledge, and I have to point back to the work that David and Jorge do on the ground, and yourself also, Anne-Marie, because you are the ones who actively work within those communities to make that last mile to meet that need. And so I guess I turn it back to you, but can I say one more thing about ChatGPT? Because that question did come up. And I'm fully in favor of using automated systems that can help us to write messages, but the work that we've done in my lab to investigate that has shown varying results. And the part of the reason is because the large language model of ChatGPT was not based upon disaster language. And so until we have trained models that utilize the language that is specific to different kinds of hazards, we don't know necessarily that the messages that come out are actually going to be about that context with the specificity that's necessary to communicate that so that people can take action. Happy to chat about that at another time, but until we've improved the models, I don't think I would ever advocate for people to rely on ChatGPT to write their messages for them.
Wise advice. So we're coming down to the end of the panel, and I'll follow Vance's good example and just offer, if folks have any parting words or next steps, and we'll start with David.
Yeah, real quick. I would just say that what we're doing with alert and warning and groups like these getting together are really going to be kind of the catalyst of what we need to do in order to make things better. I mean, we know the gaps exist. We know that there are different things out there that may fix some of those gaps, but how do we get the word out, and how do we do the research necessary so that we can really bring back some products that really will make a difference going forward? And I think that we've done that, a step in the right direction with these symposiums. And I think that some of the additional user forums that are out there are really good. And we'll share those resources that are available that come out of When Minutes Matter and all of the other products that we have, so that you guys will have a list to be able to provide to all the participants. And thank you to all the participants for being on.
Super, yes, and just looking at the volume of questions and the number of resources mentioned, there will be a substantive communication that I know Sadie is furiously compiling as we go. So certainly, although we're coming to the end, we've got 10 more minutes, but we're coming to the end of this panel, the conversation certainly will continue. Noah, your parting thoughts, next steps. I know that Rave is committed to this discussion here. What are you all thinking of doing in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think most importantly, technology is obviously a critical component here to communicating effectively with the public. It's certainly not the panacea, but it's the vehicle that a lot of these communications travel across. I would just encourage everybody, and I think Jorge hit on it a little bit 15 or so minutes ago, work really closely with your ENS provider, get to know them, establish a relationship, and challenge us, right? Our best conversations, our best customers are those that ask us to do the hard things, that make us think differently. Certainly, we have a lot of our own ideas and we explore a lot of integrations and other technologies independent of feedback and suggestions that come from our user base. But at the end of the day, you all are the ones using the platform. You understand your gaps and challenges way better than we do. So help us help you by asking us the tough questions and challenging us. And I think that's one way in which we can all collectively communicate better and ultimately protect our communities more effectively.
For sure. And just to add, some of the comments and the questions that came up were about, including people with disabilities, access and functional needs in the planning stage, and, who's involved in developing messages, et cetera. And I think it's great to have technology partners on board as we think through, there's these different components, right? We've got the technology, and we also have the message itself and how we create it to be understandable and actionable. So definitely thank you for being such a good partner. Jorge.
Yeah, thank you. Just some parting thoughts. Yeah, I mentioned it earlier. Signing up for your local jurisdiction alerts. Coming to you as a local jurisdiction. Keep your information updated is critical and absolutely important. Think about the last time you moved. Were you registered for your emergency alerts? Did you have a change of address, or even where you work? Because in some of these systems, you're able to add more than one address to get notified for. We found that at least 1% of our contacts become out of date every month. So it's extremely important that you keep your information up to date and you register for those mass notification systems for your local community. And also encourage everyone to get to know your neighbors and see who you might be able to help alert and let them know that there's an alert for your area, or there's something for your local neighborhood. Or you might be able to find somebody who you can call on if you need help to evacuate, or when an emergency happens. The last panel talking about evacuations, not just the one neighbor, but think about 2 or 3. The 2 that are to the side of you, the one that's across the street. Talk about where they might be going. Have an idea of letting them know where you might be going. Have that connection between neighbors, because right now, neighbor to neighbor and having that targeted outreach is crucial, and it's key, and it's that next thing that we're looking at. And for your local emergency managers, the reference here for you from Sonoma County, and we'll make this available again in the reference links, but socoemdocs.net, SOCOEMDOCS.net, socoemdocs.net as a reference, a website there with the materials that we have, information there about our alert and warning program, and the things we've done here in Sonoma County. We've done exercises and things in the alert and warning space, and to find out what those gaps are. And again, really appreciative of the time, and I'm super honored to be part of this panel with these esteemed colleagues. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Dr. Sutton.
Thanks. So your question was about looking towards the future, but also thinking about resources that are out there. And I would be quite remiss if I did not mention to people the work that had been done previously out of Georgia Tech on wireless communications for access and functional needs. That was a center that was funded for 20 years. The funding was recently moved to another university, but it's a rehabilitation engineering research center for wireless inclusive technologies. And the resources on their website, which is still up, are amazing. And it talks about the policy activities that they had been involved in and the research they had done across many different kinds of access needs. And it's just a really wonderful resource for people. And I will make sure that you have that information, website information, so that you can get to it. It's one of the few academic centers that I was aware of that was doing that kind of work for a very long time. But in the future, one of the things that we talked primarily about connecting over digital devices. I'm kind of excited about the other kinds of things that are out there that are going to improve our ability to communicate beyond the device that we put in our pockets or our purses. There are so many new home-based devices, assistive devices that have this potential to increase the ability to communicate with people in a very integrated way within our homes, within our vehicles, within our daily devices we use, our televisions, our refrigerators, our air conditioning systems. My vision for 10 years from now is a hologram that speaks to us, or it enacts something, some sign language that comes out of something from the ceiling, because the future it's possible that something like this could exist, and it could improve our ability to communicate with people in ways that we can't even envision it yet. But that makes me really excited, because we have this wonderful research record that exists that we can build on, so that as we roll out new technologies, we know how to make them good from the start. And how exciting is that the future has that in hand. So if there's students on this call who want to think big about how we can move in those directions, I mean, let's have that conversation. I think that within the International Emergency Management Association, there are caucuses that are thinking about emerging technologies, and it would be a wonderful opportunity to think about how these new things can inform and enhance for the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate this panel. I'm going to turn it over to Vance to close out the first day of the National AFN Symposium. Vance.
All right. Thanks, Anne-Marie, and thank you very much to each member of that panel. That was very informative. Again, I could just engage in this for a very long time, so thank you. I hope that everybody that's participated today has enjoyed this as much as I have. As has been highlighted over and over again, speakers, moderators, panelists, one of the essential primary elements of emergency management has to be an unwavering commitment to providing equitable, accessible, quality service to every individual that gets impacted, including individuals with access and functional needs. And I think what we're hearing is that together, in partnership, we're moving the needle on this in important ways, and in ways that are meaningful. So we're going to hear more about that tomorrow, but I think that the moment of optimism for me from today, as I'm looking at evacuation, that every individual has a right to evacuate their home and flee for safety in a form and fashion that is fair and equitable and accessible. Every individual has the right to life-saving information, to know what's coming, what steps to take, how to prepare, where to go. And we're moving forward down that path. But tomorrow, at the same time, we'll kick off. It'll be at 12 Eastern. You can use your same link to get on. We'll hear from Sherman Gillums. He's the director for the Office of Disability Integration and Coordination at FEMA. And we're going to hear what FEMA is doing on this effort. We're also going to hear about the incredible work that's being done to integrate access and function needs in sheltering operations. And we're going to talk about climate change impacts to the whole community and how that impacts things like inclusive recovery. So same link, same time. Thank you for coming today. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Appreciate it. Tell your friends, and we'll see you then. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.